Thank you, Jean.
Thank you. Now that I know how to put it on the agenda, I would have done it differently. I didn't know. So I just emailed everybody that I could. Dean, I emailed all the council. The only one I didn't email was the manager, the city manager. And that's obviously what I should have done. Okay.
Well, no, I'm going to explain that. I said that is, if it's staff-driven, then the city manager. But there's no issues. It has to first come to the council for a discussion. I mean, there wouldn't have been a decision that he would have had for us to make tonight.
Okay.
You did it the right way.
I'm not asking for a decision. I just think that there's been, the council's aware, some people, you're right, Citizens for Corona only has a couple thousand members, but it has been a discussion for a long time now. It's hundreds and hundreds of comments by a couple hundred people, and it's been a discussion in the city in large to some extent. It's mostly in regard to the traffic, the parking, and the safety issues that have been brought up. That's what I've read. This is not my big post. This is not something I am involved in most of the time. I'm probably the weakest vessel to present this, but I'm going to do it anyway. In an effort to make this conversation part of the council's public conversation, when I sent this off, that's my hope, that we could get up and talk about it. I want to be clear. ISCN's desire is to provide, and I can see it as crystal clear, their desire to provide their growing Muslim community with all the services that they want and need. I have no problem with that. I think that's wonderful. I am confident that the mosque wants to be a good neighbor to the residents, the sports people, anybody who visits the park. And I'm also, conversely, I'm confident that the sports people and the residents want to be good neighbors. They're not, I think at this point, from the conversations I've read, no one's quite sure how to do that. Now, the question that I've read packet after packet. I have documents, quotes, meeting agendas, more than I ever wanted to know about some of this. But the thing that goes round and around and around is, how do we get from there to here today? A building that was originally approved in 2001 for roughly 3,100 square feet with, I think it's 138 parking places. Any of the mosque people, or you might know better, has somehow, after the conditional use permit in 2009, going to become a 40,000 square foot with a second story, and yet only adding 195 feet of prayer space, which is fine. That's their estimate. But the approval did not indicate, because that fit the parking spaces. When they were first approved, they were overparked. They had more parking than they needed, because the estimate was that the peak time was 250 people, and they had plenty of parking for that. Somehow, after the conditional use agreement permit, it's still the same parking. I think that is challenging. I think that's challenging for the mosque. I'm certain they would love to have all the parking they need for their members, but they don't. Over a decade has passed since the Planning Commission meeting on March 12th, 2001, where the building was denied originally. Full disclosure, Councilman Montanez was on the Planning Commission at that time. He and 3 others on the Planning Commission, all in the minutes of that meeting, discussed their concerns about traffic and safety. And then on April 4th, because the mosque, the ISCN, brought that to be, they wanted that denial to be taken away, and they wanted it to be approved. And so on April 4th, they appealed, if my understanding is correct. And I'm here, I'll be corrected, I'm sure. And at that point, 250 people at peak time, and the parking was built to fit that. Over the years, there have been more comments, more people talking about it. They've contacted, on one-to-one basis, many of the people who have sat on the council, have left the council, or are still on the council. And so, 8 years later, if I understand correctly, after time passes, in October of 2009, a traffic engineer ran a traffic study. Not official legal traffic study, which is a much bigger deal, but a traffic study. And he translated that into 334 cars. It's a big chart. I have it here. And it translated to roughly 600 people. Now the parking is growing. There's more people. There's more cars. There's more everything. In December of that same year, The conditional use permit was then approved with no additional parking required, except the overflow was going to be allowed at Santana Park, which also, by the way, because I live right in that area and walk my dog there, and I know some of the people. I walk right by. I walk right by people. It spills into Vaughn's shopping center. Growth is how we measure success in this country and almost everywhere. And by that measure, the ISCN was and is an enormous success. They have grown, they are serving their community, and they're serving their members. An article in the Press Enterprise in 2013, November, one day, said, quote, "It's serving a growing Muslim population in the Corona-Norco area, and at peak times, Friday midday prayers, it will increase to approximately 800 people, and the multipurpose room will be used for overflow worship space." So I do have a few questions, and I hope that they can get answers, if not tonight, at some time. Does our city ever check on the various agreements that are signed by builders and or developers once they're set up and all the conditions are there, and if we let you build this and we stamp this with approval, you have to do this, this, and this. You have to put 4 trees in, and you have to put a swimming pool, and you have to do whatever. Do we ever check to see that that's done? Or occasionally do we get caught up in the law of unintended consequences? Because that's often what happens. No one can predict with accuracy everything that's going to happen in the future. I think this is more of an oversight and accountability issue for the city than I do in some ways for ISCN. They have complied with the exception, and they're working on it now, if my understanding is correct, of the crosswalk. They have complied with everything they've been asked to do. I'm wondering if this is a process issue, a process that didn't work quite the way it should have. Now, no one in politics is ever going to say, "Oh, yes, I wish I had that vote back. I didn't want to do that. We made a mistake." It's not going to happen. But I'm wondering if this is a process issue. Is there a person or a department in this city responsible for oversight or any responsibility for parking? At the mosque, anywhere. Does anyone ever go and say, "Oh, here's what we approved and here's what we have"? Because they might be two different things. They often are in real life. Has anyone revisited the parking code from the CUP as it applies to the mosque? I mean, it's 1 day a week and 1 day a year they use the public parking, and that is paid for by the taxpayers of this city. So if it has to be redone or refinished or re-gravelled, that's a taxpayer expense. I know you want everyone, I know this council wants everyone to follow all the codes and regulations, everybody equally. They must be equally applied. To some, it doesn't look that way. If it is, and there's documents that show that, I think that would be wonderful. Is there a reason or a document that would explain why the Planning Commission in 2009 never reconciled, why the Planning Commission, when it approved the conditional use permit, did not address the discrepancy between the October traffic report and the December approval, where we said, yes, fine, no additional parking needed. There was a discrepancy there, and it was never addressed. Maybe it was, but I've asked for every document. Other people in our group have asked for every document. We haven't found it. So if y'all have it, please send it on over. I've not found fire inspection record for occupancy. Is there a maximum occupancy, as there must be for every building, and has that been established? Do we have an accurate membership? This the mosque could help out on for me. Do we have an accurate membership number for the mosque now? Projection for 4 or 5 years. I know that temples, churches, cathedrals all build, and at some point they have a number that's a maximum. That's it. Got to build a new one somewhere else. This is all we can do. Do we have that? And I'm wondering if the second story of the mosque will be utilized also for overflow space for worship. These are issues that citizens are concerned about in regard to traffic, safety, parking, especially since the death up by Centennial High earlier this year. They have a right to think that possibly this could go wrong. And none of us want to be, and I've said this on every board I have ever sat on, when there's a difficult issue and a difficult decision. I don't want to be the one that CNN calls up, and when they say, had you ever talked about this? I don't want to say, well, yeah, but we just didn't get to it. That's not what you want. Let's try to prevent anything like that from happening. You're the accountable people, whether you were here at the beginning of it, whether you're here at the middle of it, whether you're here at the end of it. You're who we have to be accountable for this. I'm hoping that if we could maybe do some due diligence, some more assimilation of facts, look at what we have, maybe have some meetings at the mosque or in the community with people, with you, and people could sit down and have a conversation. I've never been known to be subtle. I understand. I can be a blunt instrument instead of a persuasive instrument. But I believe with everything in me that what we fear are the things we don't know. And I believe that if we have open conversation and we learn all sides what their concerns are, that we will not have fear, we will have understanding, and we will come to a better agreement. I thank you for your time.